Good afternoon, and welcome to the Future of the IC Workforce Gaining Information Advantage virtual event. Please welcome INSA President Suzanne Wilson-Heckenberg.
Well, thank you, Allie, and good afternoon, everybody. We appreciate you all joining us for this first installment of the INSA Foundation's 2023 Future of the IC Workforce Gaining Information Advantage Multimedia Campaign. This campaign is underwritten by QinetiQ and is part of a three-part series, which seeks to shine a light on issues impacting the IC's ability to maintain information advantage over its adversaries. Today's program focuses on the workforce and what is needed to provide talent utilization and modernize work and data structures. Before we begin, a couple of housekeeping notes. If you have any questions, and we certainly know you will, please submit them through the Q&A box on the right side of the screen. You're welcome to include your name and organization if you'd like, but it's purely optional. Our moderator, Lindy, will do her best to get to all of your questions today. We are also pleased to welcome members of the press to the call. This is a reminder that the program is on the record and will be recorded and will be available later this week on INSA's website for viewing. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce my friend and our moderator, Lindy Kyzer, who is the Director of Content at ClearanceJobs, one of the largest career site and online communities dedicated to secured clear professionals, and a phenomenal partner of both INSA's and the INSA Foundation. Lindy is a former Department of Army civilian and passionate advocate for improving the pathways into national security careers for both government and industry applicants. I think her passion will certainly show through during her moderation of today's webinar. Lindy, over to you.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. Thank you to the Intelligence and National Security Foundation and to QinetiQ. I do love this series. I love this conversation. It is an engaging one. We have a lot of really great folks on the call today, so I appreciate everyone for participating, and I appreciate your partnership around these topics and your leadership around enabling the workforce. I think we know across the intelligence and national security community, we are only as strong, and we only get information advantage through the lift of our workforce. So on that vein, I am super excited to have Scott Coltson, who is the Deputy Director for Mission Services with the Defense Intelligence Agency, Christine Parker, who is a Senior Strategist and Acting Senior Advisor to the Chief Human Capital Officer at the National Security Administration, and also Pamela Hardy, who is the Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging at QinetiQ. And again, our topic today is gaining information advantage in the workforce. I love this topic of information advantage. If you are, again, I had to add my Army credentials in there because if you enjoy reading Army policy documents to put you to sleep at night, information advantage is actually a part of the vocabulary there that we talk about. And I love applying military terminology to everyday life. I do it as a parent every day with my kids. So applying it to how we leverage the workforce and how we're creating a better IC workforce, I think is a great conversation. So my first question, I just want to kind of talk about breaking out of the status quo. And what does that mean when it comes to hiring? So we're looking at advantage, right? So we're not just gonna, this is not business as usual hiring. How do we create real strategic advantage around the workforce? And I'd love to pivot that to all of you and kind of address what does it mean maybe to hiring within your agency, or if you want to talk broader IC community initiatives that you're seeing, but what does that mean and how are we ensuring that we don't just have a workforce, but we actually have the right workforce for information advantage? I would start with you on that one, Scott.
Okay, hey, thanks for the question. I too kind of share your passion about building the workforce of the future and how do we make sure we have that information advantage as we look at the pace and breadth our IC and our department is up against. You know, one of the things we've done here is there's a recognition that, you know, the way we've been recruiting for the last, 15, 20 years is just not sufficient, to get us to where we need to be. So we've gone back to what I call the basics. We are re-looking at core competencies, we're looking at critical skill sets. And it may surprise you, as we look at how are we going to recruit across the country, we've really moved away from the eastern, part of the United States, the northeastern corridor of the United States, and we're looking at universities down in the Southwest. We're looking at historical Black colleges. We're really trying to improve the diversity of our recruiting pool, and by re-looking, those critical skill sets, those competencies, and coordinating those with the functional managers of those skill sets, what we're doing is we're really focusing our recruiting efforts. We are recruiting, for the exact need at the speed of mission that we need, not only today, but in the future. So things like data literacy and data acumen just, weren't part of the conversation 10, 15 years ago. We would look for people that were steeped in a language, steeped in a culture, and look to try to recruit those people to come to the DIA. But now we're much more strategic than that. We are looking at critical skill sets, problem solvers, strategic thinkers, data excellence, and how to visualize data, use data, manipulate data. It has really transformed the way we are recruiting. And any layer on top of that, I mentioned the diversity aspect. It has opened up, brand new recruiting opportunities for our agency. So when we start thinking about the future and what is the future going to hold for us, we will continue to target, those diverse pockets of the population. We'll expand out, those competencies and those critical skill sets for the pacing threat. But it really requires us to take that additional effort, focus that recruiting activity, and that way we bring back that talent here to the agency. And I'll just, before I step off here, just mention, General Milley said just a couple weeks ago in his open testimony to Congress, the department's got to do two things, right? We got to make sure that we are ready for the next conflict, and we got to modernize. And not only do we need to do those two things, but we need to do simultaneously. And here at DIA, we look at readiness as our people. How do we build that adaptive workforce for the future? How do we make sure our workforce is ready? And to what General Milley was saying, that's where we're investing, a large portion of not only our financial dollars, but our resource responsibilities in this space. So it's really exciting time to be in HR and bringing that talent into the IC.
You talked about money and dollars. Table that, Scott. I'm going to go back to that one later. But Christina, I want to have the same question to you. Kind of talk about, how is NSA, or what's kind of your view on making the right workforce to address information advantage?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Scott said, and NSA is taking some similar approaches, looking at our skills in terms of how we hire. So in the past, we were kind of focused on maybe an organizational model. How do we hire to attrition? And going forward, we're saying, what kind of skills do we need to bring on board? What are our priority areas? We're bringing in our strategic workforce planning organization to really think those long-term, right? Our SWT team is looking 5 years out, 7 years out, and saying, what are we going to need over the next 5 to 10 years? And how do we start to build those pipelines now? So we're doing that at the same time as saying, what are we going to need in the next 1 to 3 years, right? And how do we maintain that progress towards hiring while building towards those skills that we know we're going to need in the future? So we're all in kind of a similar place here. We have to support our missions, and we know at the agency level, it's our people that support those missions. And so we're looking at those diverse skill sets, diverse people, diverse backgrounds, diverse experiences, because those really are the culmination of things that are going to give us that competitive advantage going forward.
Awesome. And then same question to you, Pamela. How are you helping to kind of address this information advantage through your workforce? Oh, I can't hear you, Pamela. It's the typical webinar bingo. Again, fill your card. There was a non-working mic. That's a hot spot. No, I still can't hear you, Pamela. We will probably work to address the mic issues on the back end. Just shout at any point, Pamela, and I'll loop you back in. But until then, we will go on because I have so many questions to get to. I mean, I can talk. So I will say, I want to mention this a little bit from the QinetiQ standpoint, because this is a conversation that I've actually had with Matt Scott over there, talking about the application process and how to get enough people onboarded. So what we always hear back from the IC, and I love you with all of my whole heart, is, hey, we have plenty of applications. We get all the applications in the world. We don't need help with any more applications. But are you getting the right candidate to address issues? And that's kind of the issue, because we'll talk about Google is getting 2 million applications. So kind of talk about, has there been, I know that there has been, because I've talked to OD and I about this too, thought process around the IC to say it's not just enough to get the right volume of candidates. but how are we innovating our hiring efforts to attract a different type of candidate, which applies to the DEIA conversation we've had, but I think there's just a lot of things to unpack there. Scott, could you pick on that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the things that we've had real success with here is part of those tailored recruiting activities, leveraging software applications to be able to help us, you know, make sure we're getting the right candidates into the hiring pipeline. We worked across the IC and built a application called Handshake. In fact, Handshake was recognized last year as, you know, an industry best in terms of, you know, tailoring that recruiting activity. So, you know, as we go to the different universities and colleges around the nation, we're using Handset, this software application, to get employees to apply into that. And what that does is, you know, through an automated process, you know, we are ensuring that those candidates that are tailored to our mission, that are tailored to the needs of the different career fields here at DIA, are getting exactly what they're asking for. You know, there is a writing component to some of that. There is going to be in the future a language component to some of that. So how do we, you know, continue to improve upon software as a way to, you know, streamline, not only streamline the process, but ensure we're getting those quality candidates introduced into the system that come here to DIA? Because just like many of my partners here on the screen, we spend as an agency, you know, significant investment just to get people through the hiring process. So we want to ensure that when those employees, potential employees, come through that, that investment is going to pay off for us, a good return on investment, so that as we onboard those new employees, you know, they are coming on board as, you know, the best of the best that the nation has to offer. So I think software applications is a big step. There's a lot of controversy right now about AI and ML out there. You see it in the media. I think, and I see that as, for us, as opportunity in the future. How do we begin to apply AI, ML to this recruiting process so that it begins to refine the candidates and those skills that come into the agency? So while I think it does give some leaders pause, AI, ML, I see it as opportunity for us. And I think recruiting is one of those areas that would benefit from this type of automation.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Christine? I've heard that from NSA too. We have plenty of candidates. We have all the candidates, but how is it getting the right candidate for information advantage?
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely the case. There's a lot of interest in the agency, and we're happy about that, right? We don't want to change that at all. We have kind of a nationwide approach to our recruitment program on purpose because we want that interest and we want to identify those high skill sets. But you know, Scott made a good point about technology and how we utilize technology in our recruitment and hiring process. Similarly, we're using Handshake as well, especially when you're out talking to college students. It's made that relationship a little easier to manage, and it's enabled us to push information to students that might not have otherwise been able to have that level of detail about the agency. And then, speaking of technology,
hey, we will persevere. We will persevere. It's not a webinar if there aren't a few technological snafus. Did you have more on that, Christine?
I got it. I felt like that was a test in and of itself.
It was NSA who did that. Somebody didn't like your answer, Christine. They're shutting us down. No, go ahead.
So I think I was talking about Handshake and the use of technology. So it was perfect timing. And then, you know, even through the process itself. So NSA has made some really concerted steps to use technology in our interview process. The online interview tool, we utilize an online interview tool that's, you know, it has its pluses and minuses. When you're talking large volumes of applicants that you need to get through a process, it's incredibly helpful. It enables a lot of people on our hiring side to view an interview and decide, is this someone that would fit in my organization? But we want to couple that with the personal touch, right? So a lot of times in the application of technology, we're losing that personal touch a little bit, or there's a feeling maybe that we don't have that same personal touch. So we've done a lot of work too, again, on the technology side, implementing like a communications dashboard so that we can track when we're talking to applicants, who is talking to them, what messages are they receiving, And I'm sure we're going to get to this, Lindy, in the talk today. You know, it's a long process. And so it's important that we keep in touch with you, whether that's a personal one-on-one communication, or even if it's just a check-in that says, hey, we know you're still waiting. We're still here. We're excited to get you on board. And in the meantime, here's some stuff you can read about the agency just to learn a little bit more about what we do while you're progressing through this process.
Yeah, no, I mean, that is so key, because you have to have that, right? Because you talk about your 5 to 10 year talent pipeline. What we don't want is the same candidate in that 5 to 10 year pipeline waiting for their security clearance determination, which I have had that guy. So I think the more we can kind of be in touch with candidates and let them know, and again, their career journey is they're going back and forth between industry, academia, government, and that's kind of the norm, and I think what we want. This time, and Scott, I warned you this question was coming. Molly asked about pay plans, alternative pay plans. If you really care about me, give me some more money. I think that happens a lot. We're talking a ton about pay transparency in the private sector. Hey, GS Scale, the original pay transparency people, I just want to let you know. So maybe can you talk to that? How are you working on the compensation piece of it, alternative pay plans from the GS, and what are the pros and cons of that, right? Because like you said, there is, having gone through a few government iterations of changing the way pay scales are done, it's not without its risks. So Scott, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think here at DIA, one of the things that we recognized early on is the value of those incentives. So in the last couple of years, we've been working with our partners, our IC partners, and NSA has been a great, partner with us in this space. Is creating, different pay categories, to retain the talent that we have here. So we just introduced the student repayment loan program here at DIA. Lots of interest from employees about participating in the program, to assist with the rising cost of college debt. We also introduced STEM incentives. So for those officers that come from the science and technology, engineering, and mathematics background, additional pay for those officers that are filling those key positions here within the HC. We also have foreign language pay for those officers that have a propensity to learn a foreign language and sustain, those language skills at a certain level. We pay out those officers on an annual basis for maintaining those skills across the agency. We are on the GG scale, like many of my IC partners here, so there's not a lot of pay latitude in that respect, but we have a wonderful talent management program here at the agency that, as we like to say, guides employees from seeds to trees and helps them through that talent management process, whether it's assignments, training, their development, promotions. It is a very, very well structured program. So I think what's exciting about that is employees come here, brand new employees come here, whether they bounce back and forth between academia and industry, or they are literally right out of college, it gives employees a roadmap. I mean, I can be a GS7, take this roadmap, and I can chart out a clear path from GS7 all the way up to GG15. And if I wanted to be a senior executive, there's a roadmap to that as well. So I think that's exciting as well. There's no ambiguity to it, and I can take that and I can chart a path that is best for my professional. So I think that's pretty exciting.
Christine, did you have anything on the pay piece of it or compensation?
Yeah, I mean, again, I totally agree. I love doing these webinars because a lot of times we hear how different the agencies are and we all kind of operate differently. And then when we get in a forum like this and talk, we've realized that there's a lot that we're very similar. And the compensation is one of those areas. NSA takes our compensation options very seriously, especially when we're talking about STEM and market competition, and in our STEM and even in some of our cyber organizations. Language is another place where we offer incentives for foreign languages, especially those that are critically important at the time. The government, like you said, it was kind of the first, transparent pay organization, and I think we still are. It's just we offer so much more now than we did before. Sometimes it's hard for people to catch up. So, there are flexibilities in incentives where you can provide individual incentives to someone who might have options outside of the government and is trying to weigh and balance what they want to do. Much like the private sector, we're able to offer some incentives to keep people with the government. And Scott kind of alluded to just the developmental opportunities that we provide. And I really feel like that's somewhere that we have an edge over our competitors. The government invests so much time and important energy into developing our workforce and giving people an opportunity to become even more expert in the field where they're working within the agency, while also being able to learn about other fields. And you can do that via your employment with the NSA or with the DIA, right, with any of the IC agencies. I do think that's a competitive advantage that we provide that you're not going to always get in other job opportunities.
Awesome. And we talked a little bit about overclassification in the briefing. So this isn't coming out of left field, but we did have new movement on that even last week, the Sensible Classification Act. There's been a big push from Congress to reduce the number of security clearances out there. That's like piques my security clearance ears. Is there an understanding that security clearance requirements are tied to personnel hiring needs? It seems to me like in legislation, they treat the two things separately. It's a classification issue or it's a security clearance issue, and it's not a hiring issue. I think there's some pushback that to right size the workforce and have the right workforce, you kind of have to address those two things hand in hand. Do your agencies kind of see that push when you're talking about classification and what's classified and security clearances? Are those security clearance conversations coming up in your hiring conversations?
Yeah, I think we're both kind of doing the same thing. Maybe, maybe not. I know from an NSA perspective, our agency is sometimes a little bit different because we do require the TS SCI clearance even to come on board. Like I have to have it in an HR role. And so it is very much a part of our hiring process, and it's a requirement and it's a legislative requirement for NSA. But are we looking at things like how can we bifurcate the work to give people more flexibility once they're on board to maybe be able to work in an unclassified environment? Absolutely. Those are some of the things, especially when we talk about the future of the workforce and where work is headed and what employees are asking for. We definitely recognize that that's an area that we need to kind of aggressively address as we go forward in this new environment that we all find ourselves in.
I would just add to that, one of the things we've learned here at DIA is these two processes are intrinsically linked to one another. So there's, the HR, the hiring process, and then security is an absolute, partner with HR in this space. So how do we break down the barriers of information sharing between the two functions so that we can meet that 180-day timeline that the ODNI has asked us to meet? So typically in the old days, these two functions were very stovepiped, and under this Director General Barrier, he has challenged us to really break down those barriers and share that information across the two functions so that security can track the progress that's being made in recruiting, and then HR can track where a new candidate is at in the security process. I think the security offices in the IC, across the combat support agencies have done a really good job of, looking for efficiencies, how to use the data, how to speed up the timeline so we don't lose those talented people that are in our hiring pools. But the reality is, in the case of Massachusetts, underscores this, we've got to have a wholesome security process that ensures that, we are vetting people to a standard, and those people come to work ready to be part of an organization that has those security standards and know how to protect people, how to protect its information, and execute the mission. So I think the real bumper sticker here is the integration between security and HR, how they're sharing data in new ways, and kind of integrating across these two functions to ensure that we accelerate the process, still retain those highly talented people that we want to come to the organization, but still keep those standards in place that ensure we're protecting the agency.
Awesome. So I think, Pamela, you're back online. I'm not going to make you talk about security clearances and overclassification. Sorry, Scott and Christine, but I would like to get back to that first conversation about information advantage and how for QinetiQ, that's kind of, you're using your workforce to help maintain, establish, get the information advantage.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Look, I think that we're living in a time where, individuals are expecting more for joining a company of any nature. And so I think there is a piece around fostering relationships very early on to help individuals understand the company that they're joining, but most importantly, the mission that they would be aligned to. I was just talking to one of our employees and I said, what brought you, right, to QinetiQ? And he said to me, the mission. It's the mission. And I said, wow, I mean, that is probably one of the largest attractions, particularly within the intelligence space. I think one of the things that we are really committed to here at QinetiQ is really focusing on obviously fostering the relationships and creating awareness around the intelligence community and the jobs at pace. And I would say that's not just for the jobs, but that's also helping individuals with diverse backgrounds understand, to Scott's point, the security process and what's having and holding a security, access piece to their name. Not every generation sees it the same way. And so that's a reality check I think that we have to sort of understand, is that the younger generations, and I say younger, your Gen X, your millennials, your Gen Ys, they don't really have a same level of understanding around security and around the mission of all of the wonderful organizations that we serve. So how do we foster that? How do we create that? How do we get people more excited about it? That's what we're focused on here at QinetiQ.
Talking my love language, Pamela. I love it. I think people care about this mission, and we do have a great story to tell. Like, the IC is doing amazing work, and our industry partners are doing amazing work. So it's just conveying that in the right way to get the right audience onboarded. I had a question come in for you, Christine, from Dean, about how do you keep a skills profile, or do you keep a skills profile, and how is that information used for recruiting and succession planning? You kind of talked about that talent pipelining before, but for your NSA portfolio of employees, do you have a skills profile, and how does that tie into hiring and management decisions?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, do we have a skills profile by individual? At the agency level, no, but we do maintain what we call skill communities. And so we can talk about what's required within that skill community. And the community is intended to be just that, a community of people that have the similar background and skills that you have, whether or not you work in the same organization or even the same building. And so you have your your association with your office and the people you work with, and then you have this community of like-minded people that you can depend on and talk to and talk through problems with. And from a recruitment perspective, it helps us to think about, from a strategic workforce planning, what kinds of skills are we going to need in the future? Scott brought up early in the call today, talking about data acumen and the idea that we're not going to be able to train people on this forever and ever. We're going to have to hire people that have some level of data acumen, ability to handle metrics. And so from a skill perspective, we're able to look at those, broader skills and say, we have to look for people that have these types of experiences, backgrounds, education, training, certifications. And so that we can set our recruitment marketing to target those people, whether it's through a college campus, through a professional organization, right, through a conference, attendance at a conference, or a speaking engagement.
So we've had a couple questions come in about retention and employee retention, and also specific to COVID. So I'd love to see kind of a response on that, because we do know that across the IC, in general, you don't have a hiring issue, but there are some agencies and organizations that do have a retention issue, especially around critical skill sets. Did COVID have a negative impact, maybe with that, demand for work from home for folks? And then how are you addressing employee retention today? Pamela, I got an enthusiastic nod. That generally means you're up first, but.
Yeah, thank you. I would say this is something that's near and dear, because I think what COVID has brought us to is a point where individuals are really going by the purpose in their lives. I think that's the biggest thing. And one of the things that we are looking at here at QinetiQ is how do we focus on being people first? You know, there's a huge desire now for a full human experience. That is different than where we obviously look at and focus before. And so I think people are really, you know, obviously thinking about, am I going to be happy? Am I going to be cared for? Will I be appreciated? Will I have the opportunity to obviously full engage, at the same token, obviously being measured and obviously being compensated in a fair way? They're looking at all of those elements and I would say a different level of passion. And so that's where I think we have to really focus on the retention element. We have a saying here that we are people first, then business, and mission. Because you can't sort of have and fulfill a business without the people. And so that's the element that we have really been focused on. And I'll just say this, as the, you know, as the diversity and inclusion leader here, inclusivity is the differentiator. And I think that's why this is so near and dear to me, because if we're talking about attracting, but also people staying, then we obviously are looking at this as a way to how do we make the time spent, whether it's remote or whether it's in person, as meaningful to the individual as possible.
Scott or Christina, do you have anything on the employee retention piece?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I agree with Pamela. NSA is very focused on retention right now. And it was interesting during the pandemic. I think a lot of places experienced this. In 2020, really nobody did anything, right? Everyone just sort of hunkered down, stayed where they were, and sort of waited it out, right? So we saw a big dip in attrition during 2020. And then in the last 2 years, we saw kind of a correction for that. Maybe, it's hard to tell. I don't think enough time has passed to be able to determine really, was it just a correction for the stay in place that happened in 2020, or are we seeing an increase in attrition? And so because of that, and really just because of the lessons learned from the pandemic in general, NSA has been, I alluded to kind of the telework and the understanding that we need to be able to change our business a little bit to support the expectation of employees coming into our organization. NSA has a huge hiring program this year. We're going to have a big hiring program next year and very likely the year after that. And so there will be an influx of thousands of new employees to our agency. And so it's really important to us to think about how are we bringing them on board and supporting them. We have an organization in the agency dedicated totally to wellness, and they put out a wellness strategy this year that encompasses not just like your physical and mental health, but your financial health, your cultural health, right? And where do you go to find resources to help you with that when you're at work? And maybe we can't solve and answer every problem that you have, but we can provide you with resources and things to look for and a place to go and a place to ask questions. And so it's important to us to be able to do that for our workforce. And it's especially important for us to be able to offer that to people that are coming in new to the IC, that are sort of leaving behind what they're familiar with and what they're used to and kind of taking on this very important mission. And it's great and fun to work on, but it's a completely different environment that you might be used to working in. And so we are dedicated to making sure that we're supporting people in that way.
Okay, you mentioned it, Christine, so I want to hit on it now. The 3,000 personnel hiring goal for NSA. How is that going for you? Are you going to meet the mark? And if not, what obstacles are standing in your way from getting those 3,000 personnel onboarded?
Yeah, I mean, so I can't predict the future. It's hard to tell. We've hired a little over 1,700 people so far this year. I think I looked this morning. And so we're well on our way, which is in NSA's history, a huge achievement. We typically, in the last 10 years, I think our average number of hires by year was about 1,550. So we far exceeded our average already, and we have all the way until the end of the fiscal year to reach that goal. So we talked about technology. We're implementing technology. Scott brought up the 180-day project where all of the IC and the DoD is really working towards shortening the amount of time it takes to get through the hiring program. And so we've made a lot of changes in that regard to get people through our process as quickly and efficiently as we can, while maintaining communication with them so that when we do get to that point where we're saying we'd like to extend that final job offer, you know enough about us and you're comfortable enough with us that you're chomping at the bit to say yes. And so we're confident that we're going to continue, pedal to the metal on that 3,000. And we're ready to attack that year upon year for at least the next couple years.
And again, you talked about this a little bit before, Scott, but I had a question about DIA and pay bands versus the GS pay scale. So why that is a differentiator? Is that an advantage, and how does that change things for an applicant applying?
Yeah, we tried pay banding in the agency a little over 10 years ago. It didn't work particularly well for us. We went back to the GG scale. It seems to be working honestly quite well for us. Like I said, when employees have a clear path or a chart to achieve promotions and things like training opportunities are well laid out, and the criteria for promotion are well laid out, and those assignment opportunities are well laid out. The promotion thing takes care of itself, to be quite honest. So really that allows or frees up employees to really think about assignments and what assignments that are out there both in the continental United States and overseas. And then it also allows them to think about training. I just wanted to go back, if I could, real quickly, because we're kind of proud of it here at DIA on the COVID piece. So we learned a lot from COVID and are now taking some of those best practices and applying them today. And I just like to focus on the training aspect of it. We had, up until COVID, we're kind of very rigid in our training pipelines. They all had to be done a certain way, certain classrooms over certain mediums. And now what COVID taught us was there's lots of opportunities to evolve the adult learning model so that people can have that learning experience at home or at an alternative work site, or change the curriculum up so that maybe it's a hybrid of in-person or virtual, and that's empowering. One of the things that we took away from COVID was, and I love Pamela's response about people first, is we can empower people. I mean, not only on the mission side, but on the training and development side. So when I look at the lessons learned for DIA from COVID, I mean, it is all about empowering and making sure that every officer at every echelon has the tools available to be able to accomplish the mission. And then how do we sustain those virtual type of learning opportunities, and how do we create classrooms and pods that give our employees a very different learning experience than we had leading up to COVID. Like I said, I'm really excited about it because it's, for us, it is a change in the way we've been teaching those hard skills here at DIA, over the last 40 years. So I'm kind of proud of ourselves on being a learning organization, much like our IC partners here do. But COVID taught us a lot, and that's one of them. I mean, we can accomplish a lot outside of your standard, 9 to 5, come to the same building every single day.
And I mean, I love that, and it's borne out in, like, we do, candidate surveys and polling a lot over at clearance jobs. And one of the things we find, what moves people, it's money, it's mission, and it's professional development. So if you can give folks all three, and I know the IC can deliver on those, and how you sell that, it's a great thing. And I know the upskilling, the reskilling, the training piece is something everybody want to hit on. Pamela, did you want to address that a little bit now from your vantage? Upskilling, reskilling, training, how important you see that to the information advantage piece of this? We lost you again. How? If I don't answer questions enough, I think it's QinetiQ gets mad if I don't answer her questions frequently enough. If she doesn't talk, then they close the mic. The comms close. Hey, are you back? Oh, no. Upskilling, reskilling. Are you there? I hear chatter, not the right chatter. No. Okay, Christine, I'm going to pivot that to you. I know NSA loves a good upskilling, reskilling training piece. Do you have any thoughts on that and how that's leveraging your workforce for information advantage?
Yeah, I mean, you know, NSA does love the reskilling, upskilling. We have a large workforce, a highly educated workforce. And so, again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but I tie this back to our strategic workforce planning efforts, where we look at those workforce plans to tell us, you know, what are we going to need in the future, and how does that bounce against what we have today? And so our training and development organization can start to think about how we build coursework to train for the future. And language is a really good example of that, where we've built some language cross-training programs. They're very small scale right now, but thinking about what languages are we going to need people to have going into the future, especially for our missions? And are they difficult, right? Kids don't really study language as much now as they used to. And so, you know, can we find native speakers of these languages that can still meet our security requirements? And those are big challenges for the IC. And so thinking about how we maybe identify people who have aptitude to learn a language and then offer them the opportunity to cross-train in a different language so that they can maintain their language affiliation. And as we talked about earlier, there's an incentive component to that. So they can maintain their language affiliation, learn a new language, gain a new skill, and keep their incentive. It's a great opportunity for us to be a win-win for both the agency, the country, frankly, and our employees.
Guys, keep bringing up the language piece of it. I get pushback on this every time, though, at clearance jobs. I will say, like, does the IC understand that to get foreign language proficiency, you have to know people who live in other countries? So, like, that's where the blend of security and classification and security clearances and HR are tied together. Because we can talk about, hey, we want foreign language experience. And then if we scare all those people away on the SF-86, or they have foreign contacts, I mean, is there some understanding? Because, I mean, I look at 180 days onboarding, and unless you're using clearance jobs to hire all your people, I laugh and laugh because we know how long the vetting piece of it takes. So are there conversations happening around the classification, overclassification, security clearances, and how that ties in with your ability to meet these really aggressive onboarding metrics?
Yeah, I mean, are there conversations? Absolutely. And does the IC, are we aware, right, of the challenges? Yes. Is it a challenge? It's a challenge. And so talking about, and, you know, Scott brought this up earlier, this kind of better partnership between our HR talent organizations and our security and suitability organizations is critical. And those things are happening. And some of the drivers are the time to hire, right? We have to work together to bring down that median hiring timeline. It's sort of a forcing function. But that forcing function also encompasses things like this. So where do we have challenges in getting people through that security process? And language is one of those challenges. So it's not an easy problem to solve because there are security requirements for very good and valid reasons. And so it does require a lot of conversation and understanding of each other's businesses and why things are the way they are. And we are talking about those things and recognizing the need to be a little more comparative of each other's processes and understand better so that we can help people, one, share information so that they know what to expect, right? So when something's going to be long and arduous, knowing what to expect is helpful, right? We can at least set an expectation. Two, we can have ambassadors talk to people throughout that process. And in language specifically, we're doing that. Language ambassadors that are talking to our candidates. There are people that work the language mission. They can keep them excited about that language mission. They can tell them about their own experiences. And then also continuously working together to try to identify ways that we can do this better, faster, smarter.
Yeah.
I love it. Pamela, did you have thoughts on either that upskilling, reskilling, some of the back to that conversation again?
Yeah, I think that's an important piece, and I'll just reiterate something that Christine just shared. I think is brilliant. I think the other piece, as people are going through any process, right, is accommodation. Whether that's from a neurodiversity perspective, not everyone processes or sees things in the same light. And the other element is the notion of fostering sort of very clear definitions of the process, so people aren't necessarily guessing. And again, I think that's also pretty imperative as well. From a skill set perspective, there's a lot of focus on skills. And I think that's a very valid sort of element. But there should also be equally a focus on, obviously, the passion around continuous learning. One of the things that we do really well here at QinetiQ, we have a internal training team, and they do an amazing job at really starting to bring people along. One of the things that I consistently hear is the opportunity to learn as a group, but also the opportunity to learn as an individual, recognizing that everyone processes differently, that everyone receives differently. And so I think that's the piece around the skill piece. I think we are in a stage where not everyone has all of the skills that we're really truly looking for. And again, let's just talk reality. But I think we are at a place where if we find someone that's very passionate about the mission and they have 25 or 30 or 50% of the skills that we're looking for, is there an opportunity where we can foster training to get them up to speed in a certain way that allows them to really deliver the value that they should? And I think that's the piece where we have to sort of, and I think Scott brought this up earlier, we have to sort of rethink in a way around that element, because it's different than what we saw and perhaps what we did before.
Yeah, and talking again about what you said, Christine, about setting expectations for that hiring process. Because even me as a lowly, like, Department of the Army, intern, it took me like a year to get onboarded. I had to find gap employment after college. And so there was a whole cohort of us, and we figured out what our gap employment was. So I think there's hopefully partners like Clearance Jobs, folks out there say like, hey, if you want to work for some of these IC positions, you might have to fill the gap. But I think we're seeing more crossover that says, hey, there's plenty of employers that would love to take you for a year with your skill set and lose you back into the IC because you really want to pursue this opportunity. But how do we make that seem like an on-ramp and not like a holding pattern? How do we make it a positive and not a negative? Because we just, the conversations about the clearance process and how we get people onboarded faster are just a lot bigger than a single webinar will solve. I wish we could. I wish on this webinar we could solve all the problems. We did have a question about kind of the public-private partnerships, the PPTE program, public-private talent exchange. Specific to you, Scott, is that a program that you have at DIA, and how has the success of that been?
Yeah, we have a couple programs like that where we either partner with industry or partner with academia, where we will take officers here at DIA and send them off for 9 to 12 months to go get this experience in industry or academia, and then bring that experience back to the agency and share it broadly. Not only share it broadly, but they can kind of apply some of that experience in their day-to-day job. I think about the relationship we have with Johns Hopkins and our ability to send officers there, to not only get a degree in a particular STEM background or an IT background, but just the exposure they get at Johns Hopkins to the other students, and then being able to bring that back. We partner with many of the big companies, Fortune 500 companies in industry, where we'll send an officer off for a year. I think about Dell, I think about other Fortune 500 companies like that, where our officers will go, they'll get immersed into the business side of it, the industry side of it, and then they can come back and share that experience. I think that's really important. The key to these programs is making sure when they come back to your organization, they have an opportunity or an assignment that allows them to practically apply, that last year of academia or that last year in industry. But we absolutely have programs like that. We promote them pretty heavily here at DIA. I wish we had more of them, to be perfectly honest, but they are great programs, and they do provide great returns, not only for the agency, but for the officers that participate in.
Awesome. I'm told we're down to the last 5 minutes and it's lightning round, but I want to give everybody kind of a chance to kind of circle the wagons again, how we started the conversation, how we'll close the conversation. So we're talking about information advantage as it pertains to hiring across the IC. So as you look near or far term in building out your talent pipelines and building out what information advantage looks like in your workforce, what are you looking for? Because I know we have a lot of folks who are invested in this space, whether they're partners, industry partners, academic partners, or candidates. Kind of what are some of your needs as an agency, organization, entity? How can we all kind of work together for this? Whether it's a candidate looking to apply, whether it's a stakeholder or leader listening, how can we leverage information advantage to help you specifically get your job done today? I'm going to start with you, Christine.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, the agency of the future is going to need a data contingent. So we are looking for people who are passionate about our mission and excited to defend the nation. Number one, I think that's the biggest thing we have to offer to people. But we're looking for those people with some STEM background, and we're looking for people with language background. And then we need folks who are going to support them. So we talked a lot today about our training, learning, and development. So those professionals who are supporting the wellness efforts that are going on. And so we have this very acute need for software developers, software engineers, data scientists, language analysts, right? But we also have that need to bring on people who are passionate about defending our nation and ready and able to support the mission workforce. So that's kind of what we're looking for. Like I said, we have a huge hiring program this year, and we're likely to continue that into the future. And so if and when you get the opportunity to talk to NSA at a college campus, at a professional event, please stop by. We definitely are interested in you and hope you're interested in us.
Same question to you, Scott.
Christina said it probably way better than I'm going to say it. We are going to always need analysts and people that can collect information, produce intelligence, package it up, deliver. That's always going to be in need of the DIA. But the thing that's different now that we're focusing on, and Christina said it, is data. We have volumes and volumes and volumes of data that we have to clean up. We are still using the same business processes that our predecessors used, and a lot of the backroom type of activity here at the agency. So we are looking for those data scientists, those engineers that understand how to structure data, cleanse data, apply data, visualize data, so that we can begin to integrate those data across multiple functions here at the agency. It will always be the mission that brings people to places like NSA and DIA, NGA. But if we are going to be competitive in this information dominant space, we've got to get our data right, and then we've got to start using data in a way that informs decision makers to keep that competitive advantage. And that's going to start with those experts in those type of career fields.
And then same for you, Pamela. What can we do to help you gain information advantage? QinetiQ has a suite of information about this topic. So quite frankly, if you don't want to read boring Army policies about it, you can go to QinetiQ because they've written a ton about information advantage.
Well, I appreciate that. I think the first thing is obviously continue to learn from each other, right? Because there is my own theory, which is, when we obviously develop and attack problems as a team, we win. So I think that's the piece that we have to continue to do. But I think in terms of, how do we tackle sort of our opportunities, I think it just requires, really putting ourselves out there and make sure that our brand connects with real world experience. I mean, we're just in an environment right now, each of us, where we can talk about different, obviously, avenues for information. There are many people that have access, but I think there's also the element of, how do we create the experience that connects with the brand? And I think that's the piece that I think we really need to drive towards, and that's all of us, is to make sure that we obviously commit to that. Engineers are hard in general. We just had a program here for Bring Your Child to Work Day, where we really focused holistically on how to become an engineer. And I will tell you, the kids loved it. But at the end of the day, I mean, they know they have options. And so how do we continue to build that up? Obviously, with all of our education, partners, as well as our not-for-profit partners, to really drive and create excitement around that. So there's a lot, but it can be done.
Well, that's what we're here for. Those are all my questions. There were questions we didn't get to. I'm hoping that the INSA and INSF will let me follow up with some of those. There were a lot of wonky security clearance questions, which are my love language. So I hope we can provide some response to some of that Q&A, because it's bringing all of this together, right? What industry is doing, what the government's doing, and what we're doing with the clearance process. And that's what it takes to build up the workforce. So thank you again so much to QinetiQ. Thank you to Christine and Scott, and thank you, Suzanne, and your team as always for this great conversation and dialogue. I'm excited for this series and for more to come.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lindy. And we will follow up with you on your wonky security clearance questions, as I know it's a passion of yours. You did a great job facilitating. And thank you for the conversation, Scott, Christine, and Pamela. And also thank you for sharing your insights with us and for what each of you all do on a daily basis to support the future of the IC workforce. It's genuinely appreciated. I, for one, learned a lot today. And once again, just thanks to QinetiQ for underwriting this important series. Our next installment of the Future of the IC Workforce will take place on Monday, August 14th. And it will focus on alliances and partnerships, something we just barely touched on today. And so we teased that out a little bit, but look forward to really digging in deeper on that in August. And more details to come. As I mentioned earlier, this is being recorded, will be available for viewing on our website a little later this week. And when the webinar comes to an end, there is a short survey. I would encourage everyone just to take about 2 minutes, fill it out. We want to hear from you. We want to hear about what topics resonate. And that concludes today's Monday program. I hope everybody has a great afternoon, and see you tomorrow morning for my conversation with Rich Bache, the CISO at CIA. It's not too late to sign up on the INSA website. Out from here. Thanks all.